So this is me, David Noton. I've been a professional photographer for over 30 years now. I can't believe that. 30 years, how did that happen? Seems like yesterday. And this is where I would like to be right now. Okay, it's great being here at the photography show, but I'm sure you'd agree with me that standing beside a loch in the Scottish Highlands at dawn is really what it's all about for us photographers. Landscape photography has been my first and foremost love in photography. Actually, this picture I shot just last May. Gorgeous, gorgeous morning, 4 o'clock in the morning. But my photography journey started on the very banks of this loch way back in 1980. And since then, so much has changed in the world of photography. But of course, how we take pictures, how we capture pictures, and of course, what we do with them subsequently. So what I'd like to do with you this afternoon is talk with you through my approach to post-production. And what I want to do is just show you a shoot that I did here in France, in the Franche-Comté region of eastern France last autumn. Now, what we've got here is this picture here. And if I go full screen with that, this is the raw, straight out of the camera. Now, it was a beautiful woodland scene, very autumnal. And what I was interested in is these wonderful mushrooms here in the foreground. So I did this shot, but I was really struggling with depth of field, because I think if I zoom in on this picture here now, up close, can you see those mushrooms there are not sharp? Depth of field was insufficient. Even stopping the lens down to its minimum aperture wouldn't have given me enough depth of field. So what I did is I made 3 exposures here. So this shot here is focused on the background. This shot here focused on the middle distance, somewhere around here. And this shot here is focused on the foreground. And what we're going to do here this afternoon is just, first of all, work through what I need to do to this picture to optimize it tonally, to make sure all the detail is there. And then we're going to merge those pictures together using Photoshop to stack the images. It's called focus stacking. So I get that optimum depth of field. Now, despite the fact I was shooting, you can see here my details here, shooting at f/16 there. But despite that fact, I still didn't have the depth of field I needed. In fact, if I look at it, sorry, looking at the wrong images, it was these 3 frames here. Now you can see my details here. I shot at f11. If I go, this is the middle image here. If I zoom into this area there, the foreground's not sharp. It is sharp here in the middle region of the picture. Just let the image catch up with itself, but not on the background there. Can you see it's dropping out of focus there? So that's what I'm going to do. We're going to do focus stacking today. So let's just take the middle image in this sequence here. Now look at what I need to do first is input the caption in the image. Now this seems a really simple thing to mention, but you'd be amazed at the number of pictures we get sent in to us for publication in my own F11 photography magazine that don't have this kind of information embedded in it. So important to put your information in there and the caption of the image. It helps so much subsequently when you come to find your images. You've got that information there. So I'm going to put that in. Let's just move on it, but normally I would put that whole caption in there. Let's now go into the develop module and start working through what I need to do to this picture. Now, one thing I should just explain before we go any further, I'm a great believer in simplicity. What I try and do to my pictures is get them as perfect as I can in camera. If the exposure's right, if everything is good in camera, the amount of attention that I need to give to a picture subsequently in post-production is minimal. It was always thus. It was always that way. Way back when I started in photography, we used to go into the darkroom and be messing around under the enlarger. Making a beautiful print of a picture was easy if the negative was perfectly exposed and developed. It's exactly the same in the digital era. Get it right in camera and post-production is easy. The other thing to consider is we're going to move down through the develop module here and make various adjustments to the camera. But all I would say to you is before we start doing that is that just because there's a slider there doesn't mean we have to use it. Really, I believe strongly that the less we do to a picture, the better. If in doubt, do nothing. It's kind of my ethos for life, really. So let's start. And the first thing I'm going to mention is the fact that Adobe have put various adjustments we can make in a certain order, which sometimes is logical, but there's nothing to say you have to start at the top and move on down. Now, the first thing I'm going to do before I go any further with this picture is come down here to this area called lens corrections. Now, what are lens corrections? Well, basically, every lens, there's no such thing as a perfect lens. Every lens, first of all, is brighter in the middle than it is at the edges. And secondly, every lens distorts. And what this panel here is in Lightroom 4 is to correct those remedies. So what I do here is that if I click on Enable Profile Corrections there, it automatically detects what camera I used and what lens I've used there. And can you see there, the profile is, excuse me, just got to put my glasses on for this. I just double check it's got the right lens there, and it has the 16 to 35 millimeter lens there. Now, if I click that profile corrections box on and off, can you see the difference it makes there? What it's doing is two things. It's correcting the fact that the image is darker in the corners than it is in the center, and it's also correcting the distortion. But the thing is, you know, with lens corrections, in fact, with all adjustments, at the end of the day, everything we do is a subjective call. There's no right and there's no wrong with anything we do in post-production. It's your decision to make as a photographer. And with this particular picture, I have to ask myself, do I need to correct that distortion? Do I need to correct that vignetting? And actually, I don't think I do. Again, it comes back to that ethos. Keep it simple. The less you do, the better. So in this particular case, I'm not going to apply those lens corrections. But what I will do is click on the box that says Correct Chromatic Aberrations. That's dealing with any kind of purple fringing that happens around hard, sharp edges, particularly dark edges where there's a lot of contrast near the corners of the image area. There's no downside at all to correcting those chromatic aberrations. So every image, I make that adjustment. Okay, so that's my lens corrections. Now let's come in here and look at the first thing I'm going to look at is the color balance of the image. And can you see here it says Add Shot. Now it's detected the fact that I shot this picture with my camera set to a daylight white balance. Now, being a landscape photographer, I shoot virtually everything with the camera set to daylight white balance. So that means if the light is warm, as it is around sunset, then I'm going to see that light as warm, both on the back of the camera and now when I import it into Lightroom. The camera is not trying to correct that color balance. The same with cool lighting. Basically speaking, I go with the color balance that Mother Nature gives me. when I'm out there in the great wide open and hardly ever alter it. So here again, I'm going to do nothing. I'm going to keep that set to as shot and move on down. I do not want to alter the color balance of this picture. So now we come to this area. This is a really important area, and we're looking at the exposure of the picture. The very first thing I do normally when I'm post-producing a picture is look at the black and the white points. Now let's come back up here to the top, and can you see this is the histogram? Same histogram that I would have seen on the back of the camera when I was stood there in the mud, in the woods in France. And I'm looking in particular at the black and the white points, i.e. the darkest and the brightest parts of the picture. Now up here in the histogram, can you see top left there, there's that little blue dot telling me that in this picture there are a few shadows that are clipping. Now if I come down to the blacks here, and if I hold down the Alt key and I move the black slider to the left, can you see where those yellow bits are? That's telling me where I'm clipping shadows. Basically, I have no scope for adjusting the black point of the image because essentially I've recorded a perfect range of tones there. It is the perfect exposure. Just a few shadows in the darkest part of the image area around here are blocking in. But you know, I'm not going to lie awake at night at 3 o'clock in the morning staring at the ceiling, worrying about those few black points. There is ultimately a beauty in a deep, rich black, same as there is beauty in a pure white. We just don't want them to dominate the pictures. So I'm going to move on. I'm not worried about that black point at all. I'm now going to look at my white points here, and I'm going to do the same. Hold down the Alt slider, move my white points to the right, and I can adjust my white point a fair way before I start clipping my highlights. So that's what I'm going to do there. It's had the effect of actually brightening the picture now. I can now bring back the density of the picture to what I want to see using here the exposure slider. Or I can use the tone curve. I prefer actually to use the tone curve. But again, this is a purely subjective call. Just by grabbing the tone curve and pulling it down to the right like that, I darken the picture and bring it back to the kind of density I want. Really, it's somewhere around about there. It's a completely subjective call, really. So that's dealt with the exposure, it's dealt with the black and white point. What else do I want to look at this picture? Just move on down here to this area. It's called presence. And it's my opinion that this area of the develop module should come with a public health warning. Because at this stage of your post-production, it is so easy to go over the top. Let me just show you what I mean here. I'm going to grab the Vibrance Slider, which is a slider which adjusts the intensity of the colors, but only those colors which are not yet at full saturation. So as I move the Vibrance Slider to the right, it's boosting the colors. Okay, now if I go all the way there, you'll quickly start feeling quite nauseous. If I come all the way back the other way, it's like a scene out of Saving Private Ryan, isn't it? And of course, this is a completely subjective call for you to make. How vibrant do you want the colors in your picture to be? But be aware, there's quite a difference between a digitally boosted color than a real color. And so many pictures that I see are great images, superb images, beautifully captured, totally ruined by over-the-top post-production. And it's here that it can go so wrong. I think it's really easy after you've spent hours in front of a glowing monitor working on a lot of pictures, to start thinking that just a little bit more color vibrance will give that image just a bit more impact. Whereas in fact, the reverse is true. You very quickly get to the point where you're degrading the picture. And I think the hardest thing to learn as a photographer is subtlety. That use of subtle color is really what will make a picture stand out. So bear in mind, if you're altering the contrast of a picture, as we have done by altering the black and the white points, we are in fact boosting the colors. So with the Vibrance Slider, I just would, with this picture, just maybe add a teaspoonful of vibrance there, just to enrich the greens just a touch. The other thing is this clarity slider. Well, what does that do? Essentially, clarity is there to increase local contrast. The easiest way I can explain that is to actually demonstrate it. So if I move the clarity slider way over to the right, it adds a kind of harshness to the picture. Go the other way, and it's like those diffusing filters that we used back in the 1980s. Remember them? Every wedding photographer used to diffuse heavily their pictures, you know. Maybe they still do, I don't know. And so clearly, at both ends of the extreme, it's pretty heavy-handed adjustment there. Now, the thing is, with clarity, some people like to add a touch of clarity. They feel it gives a bit of impact to the picture. Personally, I'm very wary of the clarity slider. I use it occasionally. I use it particularly when I'm working in black and white. I find it a really, really useful tool. But there's a lot of detail in this picture, and I really don't want to emphasize that local contrast too much. So I'm going to add no clarity at all to the image. Keep it simple. So there you are. Essentially, here we are working through, and I've done very little to the picture so far. Next, but there is one thing I want to do. Key to this picture are these champignons, mushrooms. I love mushrooms. I'm looking at this picture thinking of sort of mushrooms, maybe with some pork cooked in cider, some herbs, you know. It's that kind of environment. But this area of the image is just a little bit too bright for me at the moment. So what I'm going to use is the adjustment brush. Really useful tool here. I'm going to click on the adjustment brush there, and up comes these controls here. Now, let's just move this up here. But first, before I do that, I'm going to come down to the bottom here and click down at the bottom of the screen. It says Show Mask Overlay. Now, what I've got, can you see the brush area there? I can adjust the size of the brush there using the square bracket key. I want to just first select the area that I want to make an adjustment to. So if I do that using this adjustment brush here, I don't have to be too precise with this. That red is just helping me to select the area I want to use. Let's go for a bigger brush size there. And I'm just going to, this is such a useful tool here. Just select that area. As yet, I've done nothing to it. All I'm doing is making the selection. Okay, that's now selected. If I now click off the mask overlay, I'm going to come up here, and I'm just going to make that area of the image just a touch darker. Can you see the effect that's having? And because down here with my settings, can you see I've got the feather adjustment up to maximum. That's given the edge of my brush and the edge of a selection a very soft edge, so that I don't see any kind of harsh halos there. So I've darkened down the image there. I'm happy with that. I think it's radically improved the picture. Click on Done. Now let's keep on moving down through the Develop module tablet, and we come to the sharpening area. Excuse me. Now all digital images need sharpening. They need sharpening not because I haven't got my focus right. They need sharpening not because I'm using a cheap, shoddy lens. They need sharpening not because I've got camera movement. Basically, all digital images need sharpening because they're made up of pixels. And sometimes those pixels get confused when they see an edge, a fine edge of detail, and those pixels don't know whether to go left, right, or in the middle. A bit like politics, you know? So we need to basically force those pixels to make their decision up. And the way we do this is with the sharpening tool. Now, if you add too much sharpening to the picture, it's actually the same tool as that clarity slider is. You make the picture look very harsh. Whereas if you add no sharpening at all to a picture, let me just go in on an area of the image so that you can see it in better detail. So that's with no sharpening. It's just not quite got that edge that we want, has it? Whereas maximum sharpening, it really brings out the detail, but can you see it's starting to give that sort of grittiness, unnatural looking edges to the picture, and over-sharpened pictures absolutely look horrible. Again, it's one of those things that people tend to go a bit over the top on. What I would recommend with sharpening actually is take the easy option, because Lightroom have made a preset down here, which is down here. Can you see? It's called Sharpen Scenic. Well, this scene is scenic, isn't it? So if I click on that, that applies a preset of sharpening, which I think is a really good starting point. And you can see it's adding 40% sharpening with a radius of 0.8 pixels, and the detail slider is at a midpoint there. The one thing I would do is, now let's just come out on that picture, is that I would adjust the masking on that, because generally speaking, we don't want to add sharpening to the area of the image where there is no fine detail, such as in skies or water or whatever. In fact, with this particular picture, there is detail throughout the image. So I'm not going to apply any masking at all. And really, at this point, I'm going to look at that picture and I'm going to say, I'm done. Let's just look at the start and the end point there. You can see on the left and the right the before and after. So what we've done is we've improved the tonal range of the picture. We've brought the density back, given it that richness, and I've selectively darkened down that tree trunk with the mushrooms in the foreground. So that's good. I'm pleased with that, and I'm going to do no more to this picture. So let's just now look at it, look at the image there, and I'm going to come out. I'm going to hit G. Go back into library module there. Now, what I want to do is do the same adjustments to all three of those images there. Let's just recap what we're doing here. This image is focused in the middle distance. This image here was focused on the background, and this image here is focused on the foreground. So what I'm going to do now is go back into Develop module there, come down to the film strip at the side here, highlight the three images there, and now if I come down here, the bottom here, you can hear it says sync for synchronize. I'm going to click on that, and I'm going to apply those same adjustments to those three images there. Synchronize those. And all three images now have got exactly the same adjustments on them. So let's now go back into the library mode. And what I want to do is now open these three images in Photoshop and focus stack them together. So all I do is here is come up the top, and it says Edit, and it says, Photo, Edit in. I'm going to edit it. Edit in Photoshop CC. Click on that. It's going to take a minute to open them up in Photoshop. I think there's this assumption that you need to spend hours on a picture to really make it into a work of art. And actually, you know, with most of my pictures, I do them in literally seconds. Maybe not seconds, but a couple of minutes. Most pictures, if you get them right in camera, are the product of just a few minutes' time. Occasionally, the odd image will need a bit more attention. What have we got here? Okay, let's go up full screen in Photoshop. Okay, so I've got the three images here. So what I'm going to do is now just go to this image here and go up here and click on Select All. I'm going to go to Edit, Copy, and I'm going to go to this image here, and I'm going to paste the other one on top of it. Command V. And now I'm going to come up to, sorry, I've just done that one. I get confused with which ones I've done. Don't save. I'm going to do the same to this. I'm going to go up here to Edit, Select All, sorry. Edit, Copy, and I'm going to paste that as well on top of the other image there. Now if I come down here, close that image there, don't save. Come to my view here, my window. I want to see my layers here. And can you see? There they are, the three layers there. Let's just make that a touch bigger. And what I want to do now is just make sure when you actually change the focus on an image, you actually change the composition very slightly because the lens moves. You don't see that with distant objects, but here, with everything very close to the lens, you do see it. So what I'm going to do now is just select these three layers. 1, 2, 3. If I come up here now to Edit, and sorry, I need to layer, and come down here to Align Layers. Where's it gone? Sorry, I'll get there in a minute. If you get in a mix with all this, there you go, Auto Align Layers. And now what I want to do is just keep it on auto, click on auto there. And it's basically just making sure those layers are absolutely aligned. That's going to take a little time there. As I said, I always try and keep things simple and do as little to a picture as possible. That's just chewing on that a bit. I shot this with 50 megapixel camera, the Canon 5D SR, so there's obviously a lot of information to chew on there. Okay, now those are laid there, and now the next thing I do is, again, I come to Layer again, and come down here and Auto Blend Layers this time. And can you see here it says Stack Images. So I'm going to click on Stack, and it's now going to stack those pictures. And hopefully we'll end up with a beautifully merged image with ultimate depth of field from foreground to background. Now, I generally speaking very, very rarely use focus stacking, but it is a useful technique to use, certainly to know about. Just working on that picture there. I do these post-production video tutorials twice every month, by the way, for my own F11 photography magazine. F11 photography magazine. And I really do think you should have a look. Just go to my website and follow the link, and you'll see that there. And here we have the merged image. Now, it's just still working on it there. But now if I zoom in and check my sharpness, hopefully we'll have wonderful sharpness in the background there. Can you see there? And also right down here in the foreground. So that's quite a lot to get your head around for one session, but I hope that was useful. As I said, F11 Photography magazine published every month with these kind of post-production tutorials. So please do have a look.